After getting to Yarilo-VI and learning that the Stellaron the crew of the Astral Express is looking for is able to cause planet-wide devastation, I started getting curious about what Stellarons and Aeons are in Honkai Star Rail. Going into Yarilo-VI and exploring further, I realized that people in this world are dealing with enemies called the Fragmentum. Throughout the main story on Yarilo-VI, there were several events and points brought up by various people that caught my attention. The first event is us hearing the Stellaron communicating with Cocolia Rand. Naturally, being a Honkai Impact 3rd player, we've seen scenes like this in Honkai Impact when the Hasha cores are communicating with their host. Later, when talking to Serval, she talks about an extreme change in Cocolia's character when taking on Supreme Guardianship. She also theorizes the possibility of a single will that's passed down from generation to generation, and that Cocolia might be under its influence. This is later confirmed to be true when the Trailblazer enters the path space and speaks directly to the Guardians' will. It is then implied that the Trailblazer gains the approval of Clipoff, the Aeon of Preservation, and wrestles control of the Engine of Creation over from Cocolia. That moment was literal fire. Now, if you're also a Honkai Impact player, I'm sure you'd be seeing the similarities by now. Throughout the game of Honkai Impact, we've seen Hasha cores have personalities of their own. They're also able to store the memories of all past hosts, which can be accessed through the core mainly by its current host, but in Chapter 32 we also learned that access of the memories can be shared. Hashas also could control their own armies of Honkai beasts, and the beasts directly under their command are known to naturally want to protect them. When chasing after Cocolia and Bronya, Dan Heng also mentioned that there was a higher concentration of Fragmentum where they were headed, which also meant they were nearing the Stellaron. That sounds oddly familiar. Now, back on the Express, we learn from Himiko that Aeons do indeed bestow power onto individuals, making them emanators, which I'm assuming is what Cocolia and the previous Supreme Guardians were, and is also what seems to me to be an existence similar to that of a Hasha. So if you haven't already read the title of this video, what I'm saying is, from what we know of the Honkai, it definitely does seem to fall into the category of Aeon. And I know, on the other side of the car, Val does say something that might lead us to not think of the Honkai as such, but we'll get to that later. Even before Yarilo-VI, in the quest where Herta is testing the simulated universe in an attempt to draw out the other Aeons, something also struck me in that moment. In Honkai Impact, Kevin mentioned that the Honkai was actually resetting time in search of beings similar to it. Now, I had initially thought that this meant it was searching for other Honkai beings, meaning they could also reset time and were also trying to screw over some other civilization. But Aeons make a lot more sense now. Every Aeon has its own path and is somewhat a similar being, but operates very differently. If you were to ask me what path the Honkai is on, my only guess could be the path of rebirth, or probably the Finality, because that's how Kevin and Dr. May refers to it. Through Himiko and Walt, we also learned that Aeons are restricted by something known as the Primum Mobile, which seems to be a force compelling them to act in accordance to their path. The Honkai could have been bound by the Primum Mobile, thus carrying out its cycle of time, but had also grown lonely and had been hoping for other Aeons to come in contact with it. As to why the other Aeons didn't seek it out, my theory is that due to the nature of the Honkai's powers of finality, the other Aeons didn't want to risk getting reset in the Honkai's range of time reset. which inadvertently isolated the Honkai and its universe from the rest. Now, I'm sure that if you had similar thoughts, Velt's line on the enemy of his homeworld might have thrown you off. When asking about Aeons, Velt says, "I once confused the enemy of my home with the Aeons, but I soon discovered the two were different in nature. An overlord in the Antimatter Legion can incinerate entire galaxies, while their Calamity Vanguards are perfectly capable of destroying a planet by themselves." Now, this is post-APHO Velt, so it's like post-Honkai. The enemy he refers to could also be the ones above. While he does mention the other Aeons and their vast capabilities of destruction on a massive scale, it's also worth noting that there are Aeons like Ix, who's just kinda like a void, just waiting for the universe to return to nothingness, or at least that's how he's mentioned so far. Then we also have Fully, who kinda just wants to be the historian of the galaxy, and not to mention Akivali, the Aeon of Trailblaze, who mingled among humans, and didn't really seem to exercise their powers on a galactic scale. Also, let me just refresh your memory on how this line could be put in there as a classic Honkai fashion misdirect. Blonde hair girl, you're not white hair girl because... Tamahagane. Naruhodo. Thank you for your hard work. Have a nice day. Or in this case, how did you know that super secret passed down from generation to generation within the same house Gunkata? I learned it from library. What the f- And I know some might say they were not misdirected by that because it was obvious and all, but even I was surprised by the amount of people bringing those points up in my streams when I talked about Durandal's identity. In any case, this is just me getting excited about Honkai Star Rail. I certainly do see it as a standalone game and don't think that it is necessary to play Honkai Impact to enjoy or understand Star Rail. I did however think that it was valid to have such a speculation because it is in the name of the game. It's called Honkai Star Rail. Though we don't yet know why, or if that even means anything outside of just placing them in the same franchise, I do think that there are such possible links, and that speculating and theorizing about them is all harmless and in good fun. But if you have any thoughts on this topic, or if there are any more interesting points to look at, please feel free to discuss them in the comments. As always, thank you guys for watching, this has been MG, and may this theory lead us starward.